everyone, and welcome back to the news, where one of the most high-octane weeks of gaming news is continuing. We do have more. So, Halo Infinite has taken a pretty damn significant PR blow because it has lost its director and studio head, Chris Lee. So that's pretty rough. Also, though, we've got great news for competition because AMD have announced their RX 6000 series of graphics cards, and apparently, they actually stand toe-to-toe with Nvidia's latest offerings, which, if you know what's going on with the latest RTX series, that is really impressive and bodes incredibly well for the state of competition in the market. Also, we have got a lot of big numbers from Sony and from Microsoft. It turns out both of those big companies can be doing really well, seemingly not at the expense of each other. Then, Cyberpunk's delay reasoning has essentially been confirmed, and this is a bloody surprise, we have Anthem news. It's made an appearance again, and rather shockingly, it actually looks like it's going in a good direction, so that sure is something. And speaking of some things, of course, it's nearly the end of the month, so we're doing our big push for this month of loot. There you go, one of them's already fallen over, and of course, you'll also get the Rogue pin. It's of course all straight from our game dev team to you, and yeah, supports what we're doing a whole bunch. Plus, I believe today I'm also putting up the first and behind the scenes vlog that I've done in quite some time. So that's what's going on Patreon. Thank you, patrons. And with that said, let's get into the news. Well, according to Bloomberg and backed up by others, Halo Infinite has lost its second director in 2 years. That's really quite bad. So this guy, Chris Lee, was apparently sidelined shortly after Halo Infinite's reveal, and this was to make room for Joe Staten to basically come in and lead the campaign. Now, Joe is basically Halo Old Blood, so I would say that maybe him being involved is a good thing if some new direction was needed there. That said, the fact that, the heavy rumor that that is the case doesn't really bode well, considering that game was supposed to be coming out, well, I suppose, in a few days, essentially. Now, all of this stuff is despite claims that Lee was actually still leading the creative vision of the game. So they were claiming he was leading the creative vision, and now he's gone. So, yes, that now actually means that the game is in the hands of Joe, who of course is, as I said, Halo Old Blood. So that could actually be a good thing. But that's not the end of it, because according to Brad Sams and Jez Corden, there may actually be further personnel changes to be announced on the project. Which would, okay, reality is reality, we have to deal with it, but if that is the case, then that sucks, because it bodes very badly for a game that really should have been incredible, a game that needed to be incredible, given that there was Halo 4 and then Halo 5, and they notably didn't decide to do a Halo 6. No, they did a soft reboot, Halo Infinite, because, well, the second trilogy, what was it? The Reclaimer trilogy, they tried to call it, just didn't really pan out that well narratively. Now, Bloomberg's assessment of this whole situation is that the game's development has just been just rocky, generally speaking. And that might be putting it lightly, because they have had 2 lead creatives gone in 3 months. That's really bad. Now, Joe leading single player, that did feel like it was trying to get some of the old blood back in to course correct hard, which, as somebody who likes what the Halo Old Blood did, that's pretty good for me. But who knows, that may not even be going according to plan, because now we've got another departure and we just don't know what's going on. The community's not that hopeful. I would definitely say that's the case. There's a lot of anger directed towards just the current Halo and 343 leadership. I think a lot of that is, people being overly nasty is not warranted. People being suspicious and disappointed, that is warranted. Bloomberg themselves are pretty quick to point out that the Master Chief is still slapped all over your Xbox Series X boxes. It's just that he's not going to be shipping on that console for quite some time. Now, we believe 2021, but who knows? Is this a situation where Microsoft would need to cut losses on Infinite and reboot the project with a heavily reshuffled team or something like that, and maybe have their other studios hold the fort? It's kind of hard to say, but here's what I would say. They've basically shown nothing that has been received in a near universally positive manner about this game, right, since its reveal. Now, that's not something you can say for most of what Sony have been doing. It's just, for me, it's hard to see a world where Halo Infinite comes out next year and is the game that it deserves to be, and I would say needs to be. And that's really, honestly, that's just bloody depressing to say. And then also there was the cosmetics drama that we didn't get around to covering, where basically it seems like there is monetization that is along the same lines as the Destiny shaders. Now, you could see that making sense in a world where, say, the multiplayer is free to play or something like that. But yeah, suffice to say, that kind of sucks, because we all remember, trying to get recon armor and stuff like that back in the day where, those armor appearances were a badge of honor. So those moving on to a Destiny shader-like system, I think it does erode a part of the prestige of actually progressing in Halo, because progressing in Halo wasn't about getting new gun upgrades and attachments. It was far more about, like, bragging rights. That being diminished, I think, would be pretty sad. Okay, time to stop the sadness for a little bit and talk about AMD. This is incredible news. So the day before Nvidia's RTX 3070s went on sale, AMD revealed their next generation of graphics cards. It was, of course, a well-produced, well-done presentation, but the info was the star of the show because they are directly countering Nvidia's product line, and not only are they matching performance, which sometimes they've just barely done or struggled to do, but they're also doing it at like similar-ish prices, in some cases lower prices, and also using a lot less power. Now, considering how much of a leap Nvidia's latest generation was, that is really impressive. So the 3070, the RTX 3070, is going up against AMD's RX 6800, which is $80 more expensive at $580, but has 16 gigs of VRAM and seems to perform decently better at 4K. So yes, this is 4K 60 FPS gaming at like a below $600 graphics card. That seems pretty insane, and certainly when I look at that from a video editing perspective, 16 gigs of VRAM for that price, that is pretty sweet. Then also we've got the 6800 XT. That is their answer to 3080, and it has, 16 gigs of VRAM, a base clock above 2 GHz, and it comes in at $649, a whole $50 cheaper than the Nvidia equivalent, and it only draws 300 watts of power, which is pretty cool. But then the mic drop moment was the 6900 XT, which is their competitor to the 3900 from Nvidia, and it seems to perform similarly across the board, but here's what's important: $999. Yep. The 3090 is $500 more expensive, while also being larger and drawing more power. And what I think is interesting there is, I think some of those top-end cards, there's probably a bit more margin on them. So it's interesting that, maybe it's a situation where AMD are just a bit more happy to cut down some of that margin in order to be more competitive. I think for them that would be a very wise move. I think it's almost even worth just, cashing in their CPU profits to just try to get GPUs back up there, because of course Nvidia has done very well on the GPU market share for quite some time. Now, also they did announce other features. They've got their Rage Mode one-click overclocking solution, and they did mention plans to compete with Nvidia's DLSS with their own version of super sampling, and it's one that could actually, according to The Verge, make its way to consoles, which would be really cool. Of course, DLSS 2.0 is extremely good, and it did take Nvidia a while to get DLSS to be that good, so as much as this is cool, I think they still are behind. I think generally AMD are behind in drivers, they're behind in some of those extra features that Nvidia have at a really good stage, but the raw hardware does seem to be there at a pretty darn good price point. Then the next thing to cover is actually extremely important, and it's AMD using what could be a unique competitive advantage for them. Because do Intel make GPUs? Well, I mean, actually there's quite a lot going on there, but not really as far as most, gamers are concerned. Now, that means that AMD have a specific, unique thing that they can leverage. It is the fact that they can basically do everything, because you can have a Ryzen 5000 CPU, you can have a 500 series chipset motherboard, and an RX 6000 series graphics card. And if you do that, then your CPU can directly access your VRAM, and that can actually see GPU performance gains of up to 13%. So that's really big, and that is something that Nvidia and co can't really do unless they start to work super tight with Intel. But they wouldn't necessarily want to do that, because I think AMD is fast going to become the default choice for a lot of gamers, considering that their single core performance is really actually catching up and doing very well, and their IPC improvements have also been fantastic. So basically, AMD has completely stepped up Nvidia's incredible 3000 series with their own very strong range of cards. That is not something that anyone expected because historically AMD have been behind in this regard, and this is fantastic. Nvidia, while being top dog, have competed, have been doing so well, right? Now, they're doing these really big leaps, right, with the 3000 series cards, and now AMD's matching them. So what is a Nvidia that's really wanting to fight back? What are they actually going to do? I think that's pretty exciting, and generally competition is an absolutely incredible thing. So, great news here. With that said, let's move on. It's time to talk about finances because it is financial season, and we've got some fun stuff from Sony and Microsoft where, to give you a bit of a spoiler here, everyone's plan is working and everyone is winning. Yeah, it's not a zero-sum game. Turns out when your market can expand and people can buy stuff from everyone, it's not always a zero-sum game. So, Sony have got huge hopes for the PS5 launch. They sold 7.6 million PS4s in their first fiscal year, and they plan to beat that with the PS5. And that basically means they expect to sell more than that by the end of March. And that is despite a situation where supply seemingly is lower than demand. Now let that sink in. Sony believe that this is a $500 box that will break records in one of the most turbulent years in modern history. So that's quite bullish. Of course, though, gaming is bigger than ever, and in a world where lockdowns and pandemics are happening, yeah, people are really retreating to gaming. Now, also, they're doing extremely well across the board. Their games and network segment has had its second highest operating profit ever. That's pretty major. And that's in a year where they're also manufacturing millions and millions of units of brand new hardware, and that's obviously something that's being done at a loss, so that's also all quite good for them, quite impressive really. And, usually the investment in a new console launch causes a huge loss in that fiscal year, which, of course, is later recouped. This time, though, that's something that is being really quite well countered by digital sales and PS Plus revenue being super strong. And that really is impressive. Now, we've also learned that the average PS4 user has 13 games in their library. So, let's see, 113 million PS4s have been sold, and that would mean 1.5 billion games. That's a lot. Now, it's not sold as many copies as the PS2 did, but it's just about to overtake it in terms of games. Now, moving over from them to Team Green on the Xbox side, we do have less info, but still good news because they pulled in 3.1 billion this quarter, and that is a record high, and that is up 22% year on year, and of course, no prizes for guessing why, it's pretty obvious. That was driven by content and services, which was up 30%. Yes, that means it's a lot of Game Pass subscription money, and that's, while they were doing things like giving away months of Ultimate for £1. So yes, they're on track to make serious money. Halo or no Halo, and I think that's the big thing here. PlayStation is doing incredibly off the back of its exclusives. Microsoft does not have that much in the way of exclusives that are incredible right the hell now. They do have some really good games, but they are definitely weaker. But even with that, they can still do incredibly well. And I think that shows that going into the next generation, the amount of value you can get for general video game playing on the Microsoft side because of that subscription, for a lot of people, that's going to be major. And I think that means that no matter how well Sony does, I think Microsoft are actually going to do very well as well. Now that said, Sony does want to get a bit more into this service revenue because they've announced the full lineup of games for their PS Plus collection, and that Bugsnax will be free for PS Plus users on the PS5 only in November, alongside with Hollow Knight and Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Now, Bugsnax for free on a console launch is going to get a lot of people playing the game. I think people who would otherwise overlook it, so that's pretty good. And it could also help the PS5 launch lineup out pretty well, especially because it's a bit lacking in family-friendly games. So I think the foresight to throw Bugsnax in there actually does show that Sony's probably learning how to use PS Plus pretty well. And another good example of this is Destruction All-Stars. This was originally a $70 launch title, but Sony actually pushed it back to February, and it's being bundled in with PS Plus for free. Of course, that's looking to replicate Rocket League and Fall Guys. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, of course, this is also a decision that could have been in response to extremely low pre-order numbers or just weak tracking in general. And I think that at its full RRP would never compete with Spider-Man or Demon Souls or even most of the third-party offerings. Then also, the PS Plus collection it's a serious winning move. It's $10, and it offers 20 great games, half of which are just first-party bangers. So for a lot of people who maybe have not been in PlayStation land, wow, what an incredible way to get started, right? But anyway, with that covered, that's basically the situation for both of the big companies. Of course, we're very close to the release date of these consoles, which will be a pretty damn exciting time. Okay, let's talk about something a bit less exciting, and that is Cyberpunk's delay. Well, the good news is we now know why it's been delayed. Their CEO basically confirmed what people were thinking. And the problem is current-gen consoles. You know, 7-year-old hardware that basically always holds the whole lot of us back. A lot of PC gamers would say this in general, and this is a case where it's literally true, because in a conference call, they said that the game is actually ready for PC, and that it does play well on next gen, but that the only thing left is finalizing the process concerning current gen consoles. There's not much else to take away from this other than, well, people will be happy to get the game soon, will be happy to be free, you know, away from those obsolete gaming boxes soon as well, so that they'll stop holding us back with tying the whole industry to very, very old hardware, especially the Xbox One. But yeah, there you go. It sucks. You know, the whole situation is messy. A lot of people have... It's funny. It seems like people really turned a little bit. Like, I was seeing a lot of people who I think would have been sort of pretty diehard fans who would have been, you know, coming out pretty negatively against the likes of us for some of our previous coverage. Of course, that's from a perspective where, personally, it's one of my most, you know, anticipated games in a very long time. I cannot wait to play it. But it seems like a lot of those people are actually pretty pissed. And I think some of that is fair, because at the end of the day, they did really sell to people no more delays, and they did have to go back in that. So that is, I think, obviously just bad project management. It really has to be. And I don't think it's just a little minor incidents of bad. I think it's like legit terrible project management. How do you take the decision to delay your game and then only a few weeks later have to put another month on? Like, how did you estimate that so bad? Having your estimate being like 50% off in terms of time, having that happen to you when you're making a plan 5 years, 4 years in advance, fine. But when you're making that weeks in advance, what the hell? That is so weird. So, yeah, I think this is a company that's going to have soon more money than it could possibly spend in an efficient manner, because I think this game's going to do so well. And I think what they need to do is they need to take it slow. And I know this is a company that kind of does take it slow, right? They don't push out games all the time. But I think what happens is, I think they actually might be going internally really fast all the time, but just being really inefficient. I'm not trying to backseat them or anything, but I think that this becomes a valid thing to say, given their history of delays. So I think they need to work out, and what's really going to be important in building the future of this company is how they can actually turn this situation around, and how they can actually build their company in a slightly different way in the future so that this doesn't happen, and so that things come out in a more smooth way. Because, look, we're in a situation where this has sucked for their employees who've had to crunch and all that stuff more. It also sucks for a lot of their customers who have consistently been let down, right? This is not a win-win for anyone. This is just a game going over time and over budget and probably having to cut a whole bunch of things because of bad project management. And that's a lose for everyone. So I really hope they're able to fix this in the future. Okay, let's keep on going. So speaking of underpowered consoles, the Switch has found a way to actually get some games on it that really would just not be able to run. Control is one of those games, and it's going to be on the Switch via a cloud version, and Hitman 3 will be joining it soon. Now, what's interesting is that Resident Evil 7 and Phantasy Star Online already use this system, but this now is the first time it's going to be available in the Western market. Now, I'll say this. It does not feel right to buy a version of a game that is available only to stream for such a high price. It's $40 for an unlimited access pass, and that's not even you streaming it, I mean, at, the most incredible settings or anything like that. That's streaming being designed for Nintendo Switch. Now that said, I just said that about streaming it on a Switch. Stadia's also got the same business model, by the way, of full price for a streaming version. So yeah, it's a bit sucked, to be honest with you. But it certainly is a way to get it going. Now, according to some users, there's even a queue to get into this game that you pay, even though it's a single-player game. That's pretty embarrassing. It's not really good, but I do think that this is a sensible solution for getting some games onto the Switch. Now, in other Switch news, and this really just does show you how that is not a strong console, Yeah, the Hyrule Warriors free demo has got players saying it's sitting at a nice low 20 FPS in its co-op mode. That's really bad. That's just a bad gameplay experience. Yeah, I mean, that's a game that Nintendo are marketing as a Breath of the Wild prequel, right? And it's running at that much of an unacceptable rate. I don't know, man. I wish that, Nintendo gamers get such incredible games. They really do. I just wish Nintendo gamers got to see those games shine. I mean, if you looked at Breath of the Wild running like 4K 60 on an emulator, and I know that stuff's not perfect yet, but man, they play so well and they look so well. If only the average Nintendo player, and if only Nintendo offered those people an option so that they could, if they wanted to, spend more money on Nintendo hardware and actually get that better experience. Basically, right, that Switch Pro that's been rumored, that needs to be on the way. It really, really does. So, there you go. That's the Switch situation. And finally, I know you've all been weak at the knees waiting for this one. Anthem. Yeah, it still exists. After a very long silence, there has finally been an update, and this time it's about Javelin gameplay. And of course, in line with Anthem updates, it's short, but I will say this, it's focused, and it does show some pretty radical improvements to the gameplay, and of course a brand new UI as well. Now, this update basically showed off new skill trees, multiple specializations, and basically massively revamped gear and weapons for the Javelins. That's exactly what this game needed. And it's funny, it's what this game needed, and it's what it can do. Over in Avengers Land, which is like Anthem 2 in a way, can they just revamp the gearing system and the weapons? I mean, it's not like you just give Hulk a bigger gun or a different gun that's more fun to use. So, I don't know if they'll be able to fix that game in the way they actually can. Maybe they could fix Iron Man and make him really fun. I don't know about the other characters. But yeah, look, here's the situation. Am I going to sit here and say Anthem is saved? No. Am I going to say that these steps seem like an important step towards it being a relevant game? And does it look like they're trying to follow in the footsteps of really good action RPGs and loot shooters? Yeah, they are moving in that direction. Of course, execution is what matters, but I will say the communication here is kind of refreshing, and the fact that it's all been so slow and low-key, I actually read that as a good thing, because it means they're not trying to hype it up and do like a big marketing campaign. It seems like they genuinely know that they need to wait. They need to wait. They need to rebuild the entire game, and there's no point in marketing it now. They may as well just share updates with their community. So I actually think that bodes well. And speaking of things boding in a direction, this story being over now bodes the end of the video. The video's over. If you want to support what we're doing, you can get a bunch of art. There we go. I've dropped another bit. Don't worry. You'll get pristine stuff. Supports our team. You get some cool art for your walls. Also get the rogue pin, which is really nice. And only a few days left for this month's set before we kick over to the next one. That's it for me. Thank you for watching. And with that said, I will see you next time.